All right. Are we live? Do you think we're going to change out? That was a flicker. All right, we will assume we are live. I would like to call the April 7th, 2015 City Council meeting to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Bush.
Here.
Soldner.
Here.
Pyros de Carvalho.
Here.
Dave Line.
Here.
Crowett.
Here.
Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And this morning's prayer is given to us by Kim Berry with Trinity United Methodist Church. Good morning.
Good morning. Let us pray. Loving God, thank you for the gift of this new day. May we seek opportunities to love one another as you have commanded us to do, to love even our enemies. Thank you for the men and women who lead and protect our community. May we all work for those who are vulnerable and in need as we strive for justice for all. Guide our meeting today, Lord, through our present and future leaders. We pray all this in the name of the risen Christ Jesus. We pray, amen.
Amen. Thank you. All right, we have 4 proclamations this morning. The first one will be the Child Abuse Prevention Month, and Michael Woods is going to accept that. If you'd like to meet me at the podium.
Good morning.
Whereas children are a key to the state's future success, prosperity, and quality of life, and while children are the most valuable resource, they are also our most vulnerable. Whereas children have a right to be safe and to be provided an opportunity to thrive, learn, and grow, and whereas child abuse and neglect can be prevented by supporting and strengthening Kansas families, thus preventing the far-reaching effects of maltreatment, providing the opportunity for children to develop healthy, trusting family bonds, and consequently building the foundations of communities. Whereas we must come together as partners so that voices of our children are heard by all, and we, as a community, extending a helping hand to children and families in need. And whereas by providing a safe and nurturing environment for our children, free of violence, abuse, and neglect, we can ensure that Kansas's children will grow to their full potential as the next generation of leaders, helping to secure the future of this state and nation. Now, therefore, I, Cindy Prowett, Mayor of Hutchinson, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2015 as Child Abuse Prevention Month. Thank you. And would you like to say anything?
Sure, thank you. Good morning. Michael Woods with the Kansas Children's Service League and the supervisor of the Healthy Families Program for Reno County. I'd like to thank the council for its recognition and support for the month, the April for the Child Abuse Prevention Month. Kansas Children's Service League has been working with families and children in the state of Kansas for over 120 years. And hopefully we are seen as advocates and trying to do prevention for those families. And one way we do that is the recognition that we need to serve and hopefully reduce, if not completely wipe out, child abuse and neglect. So thank you very much.
All right. And Michael's going to stay.
Put my other hat on.
And the next one is the Week of the Young Child. Whereas Reno County Early Childhood Council and other local organizations in conjunction with the National Association for Education of Young Children are celebrating the Week of the Young Child, April 11th through 16th, 2015, with many activities to celebrate this event. And whereas by calling attention to the need for high-quality early childhood services for all children and families within our community, these groups hope to improve the quality and availability of such services. And whereas the future of our community depends on the quality of early childhood experiences provided to young children today, and whereas high-quality early childhood services represent a worthy commitment to our children's future, now, therefore, I, Cindy Prowett, Mayor of the City of Hutchinson, Kansas, do hereby proclaim April 11th through 16th, 2015 as the Week of the Young Child, and urge all citizens to recognize and support the needs of young children in our community. Nice to see you, Michael.
Yeah.
Joe, would you like to say something on that?
I will. I'm representing the Early Childhood Council. This year, as in past years, we are celebrating the Week of the Young Child. I have left a flyer with you to represent what we are doing this year. As it was said, we start Saturday the 11th and it runs through third Thursday the 16th. There are many free activities that families can come to and come to as many as they want, with it all ending on third Thursday. Last year we had over 1,000 children being able to participate just that one day. So if you are interested, the public is interested, contact me at Healthy Families or other early childhood programs to be able to get these flyers and more information. Again, I'd like to thank the council for its recognition and support. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next one is Fair Housing Month, and we have David Dove to accept that award. Whereas Title VIII of the Civil Rights Act of 1968, as amended, of which Title VII declared that the law of the land would now guarantee the rights of equal housing opportunity, and whereas the principle of fair housing is not only national law and policy, but a fundamental human entitlement, and whereas barriers that diminish the rights and limit the options of any citizen will ultimately diminish the rights and limit the options of all, and whereas the City of Hutchinson welcomes this opportunity to acknowledge the importance of fair and equal housing for all people without regard to race, religion, color, age, sex, disability, national origin, ancestry of family, or family status. And whereas equal housing opportunity is a condition of life in our city that can and should be achieved. Now, therefore, I, Cindy Prowitt, Mayor of the City of Hutchinson, Kansas, on behalf of its citizens, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2015 as Fair Housing Month, and express the hope that this year's observance will promote fair housing practices throughout the city. Would you like to say a few words?
Thank you.
There you go.
Yes, I'd like to thank the council and the mayor for acknowledging this. This coincides with something that we have been working on as the Human Relations Commission in conjunction with the ADA Advisory Board and also the Housing Commission. We have a fair housing seminar that is going to be conducted on April 9th from 9 to noon at Memorial Hall. You can register online at hutchgov.com, or you can call the city manager's office at 694-2608 to register as well. The final deadline is actually noon today, and we're going to be covering topics of fair and accessible housing, Kansas Landlord Tenant Act, and also the Hutchinson Property Maintenance Code. Again, thank you.
Great. Thank you. I hope you have a nice turnout. All right, and our last proclamation is for the Kiwanis International Day, and Kathy Davis is going to accept that. And Gary Getting.
One of the other
And I'm sorry, I don't. What's your name?
My name is Gina.
And Gina. Long?
Yes.
Gina Long. Whereas Kiwanis International is one of the largest service organizations in the world, and more than 600,000 members of all ages and abilities in more than 80 nations, and whereas the members of the Kiwanis clubs of Hutchinson and downtown Hutchinson are devoted to improving the world, one child and one community at a time, by seeking primacy to the human and spiritual rather than the material values of life, and whereas in addition to improving lives, Kiwanis club members promote the development of community leaders, positive role models, intercultural understanding and cooperation, and opportunities for fellowship, personal growth, professional development, and community service. And whereas the first Kiwanis Club started in service in Detroit, Michigan, USA in 1915, and Kiwanis International celebrates its centennial anniversary of the founding of the Detroit Kiwanis Club, #1, and whereas the service provided by the Kiwanis Clubs of Hutchinson and downtown Hutchinson will continue to have a positive impact on our community and citizens. Now, therefore, I, Cindy Prowitt, Mayor of the City of Hutchinson, Kansas, do hereby proclaim April 16, 2015, Kiwanis International Day, and call upon all citizens of Hutchinson, Kansas to render support to the members of this organization and to make themselves aware of Kiwanis International, whose members this day are providing meaningful service to our homes, schools, and communities. Thank you. Would you like to say a few words?
I guess I'm elected. Well, thank you guys for recognizing Kiwanis. I've been in Kiwanis a little over a year and thoroughly enjoy helping the community with the different programs we do, from pancake feeds to working with United Way to helping kids, our Circle K in college, our Key Club in high schools, and our Builders Club with Boys and Girls Club. So thoroughly enjoy serving the community and all the programs we can do to help.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. All right, would the clerk please call the next item?
Item 5, oral communications from the audience.
All right, and this is a time where we take communications from anyone in the audience that would like to address council on a topic that is not on the agenda. If you would like to address the council, we ask that you come to the podium. Please state your name and address, and please limit your comments to no more than 5 minutes. Do we have anyone? Yes.
Dan Deming, 24 East 28th. I thought I would come before you today to speak on behalf of an ordinance that covers dogs and cats and chickens and loud music on Main Street and fireworks, because we know those are the things people are really interested in, as opposed to budgets and long-term planning.
Dan, yeah, 5 minutes. Dan.
5 minutes. I promise I will not exceed that. No, I was here today since the county isn't meeting until tomorrow, simply to say thanks to Mr. Bush and to Cindy for their longtime service to the city. I've had an opportunity to observe both of you, as well as the entire commission, both as a reporter and now as a member of the county commission. And I've seen a tremendous amount of growth and great decision-making and increased knowledge of city government by both of you. I think you've done a fantastic job. You have a lot to look back on the past 8 years of accomplishments of the city, such as the recently completed Wiley building and many other things that have happened in those 8 years. And really appreciate your service to the community. And since this is your last full day, I wanted to come down this morning, since we aren't meeting today, and say thank you. And I know the council will be in good hands with the replacements. You've got some excellent people running for office, and you'll be hard to replace, but there are good people waiting in the wings. And I just wanted to personally thank you for your service to the community.
Well, thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Amen.
That wasn't so bad.
We got the nice Dan Deming.
Do we have anyone else in the audience that would like to address council? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the next item?
6A through F consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
A motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Bush.
Yes.
Soldner.
Yes.
Tyros de Carvalho.
Yes.
Dave Line.
Yes.
Pruitt.
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 7A, consider ordinance establishing a rental registration and inspection program.
Good morning, Mayor and City Council. I'm Janet McCarron from the City of Hutchinson Planning Department, the director there. And with me, I have Trent Maxwell, who's the building inspector, the chief building official. And I think we're going to be tag teaming on this presentation, so hopefully you'll bear with us as we move in and out of the camera range here. Now, there we go. So I was going to have Trent start the presentation. We have a couple of photos that he wants to describe for you, and then we'll go through the ordinance.
Okay. Trent Maxwell, building official. So the first photos that we're going to look at is kind of an overall description or summary of what the property maintenance code is about. It is the code that was adopted in 2011. It's the code that we have used for all of our rental inspections. But for those landlords and public that have not dealt with us on any of our inspections, this is kind of what we see as a problem, and these are kind of the direction that we're going to try to correct these problems. Electrical issues are probably the most common, other than maybe mold. We get a lot of mold complaints. This is just showing two strips that are plugged in to a single outlet. A lot of the older homes were not designed to have all the televisions, appliances, and things that we have today. And so the solution in this case was just to add more outlets for them to plug in, and it overloads the circuit and therefore causes a fire hazard. Same thing, these are wires poked through the ceiling that should be in a box protected. So if there's any connection problem with that light, that it's contained within a metal box or an enclosure. This is just open and tied together with some tape. Kitchen sink, bucket holding the water there. As you can see, it's been there for a long time, so they probably dump it quite often. Going through all these pictures, these are just a handful. I went through over and over and over, and I could not believe how many pictures I had with buckets under traps or under the sinks catching the water. It was amazing to me. So, also, this is one of many bathrooms where I found most of the wall or portions of the wall being opened. Maybe they worked on some valves or some kind of work at some point in time, never did get back to it, or maybe it just simply fell off and they never did fix or patch in that wall. This is mold. We are not mold experts. We do not claim to be mold experts. There is sanitation requirements in the property maintenance code. We will cite them to clean or replace the area that does have mold on it. We get mold complaints all the time. And this is just an electrical panel that is in a bathroom. There's areas that are prohibited to have electrical panels. This is one of them. Ventilation on a water heater. A lot of times there's things that are done that are not quite right, and it creates a hazard of carbon monoxide coming back in. Those gases that are unburned, either backdrafting down back into the house or staying in that room. So that's what that picture is about, how they ran the 90 with the pipe is incorrect. There's other photos that we have with holes in the vent. Duct tape used to try to patch the holes. And this is a foundation that washed out. You can see how many of the block is into the pile of sand or dirt, just showing some of our structural problems that we see out there.
So those were all photos that were taken in rental properties in the city of Hutchinson by our building inspectors. And as you all know, we do have a complaint basis. We do address these on a complaint basis. The Housing Commission has been working with staff to try to implement something on a more permanent basis. They really feel like the complaint basis doesn't necessarily work all that well because some tenants are afraid to complain. They had talked about possibly doing a rental inspection program where it would just be on a voluntary basis. But after discussions with the Housing Commission and City Council and study sessions, it was determined that really the best way to make sure that everybody has a safe place to live and is not living in conditions like those photos we just showed would be to have a mandatory rental registration and inspection program. And staff has been working with the Housing Commission, with one another. We've talked to other cities, and today we have a proposal for you all to consider. So the purpose of the rental registration and inspection program, I'm not going to read through all this, is basically the first purpose is to have safe living conditions, protect the character and quality and stability of residential areas, preserve land value and the local tax base, and reduce complaint-based inspections, among other purposes. Our proposed ordinance would have these sections: registration, inspections, results, reinspection, conversions, and incentives, and I'll touch upon each of these briefly. What we're proposing that the council consider is mandatory registration of every rental unit located within the city limits. The registration would be renewed annually as well as upon change of ownership. Annual registration fee would be $25 for each unit, but that would cover the cost of inspection, so there would be no additional fees for inspections. There would be an initial grace period. We're proposing that this would be implemented January 1st of 2016, and there would be an initial grace period to register until April 1st. For every month beyond that, that a unit was not registered, they would be assessed a fine of $50 per month. And then any unit not registered by June 31st, 2016 would be deemed uninhabitable. I guess there's not a June 31st, is there? Should be June 30th.
June
30th.
Would be
Not
deemed
unless you're making an
uninhabitable.
ordinance for such.
Do we have that authority to change the calendar?
Before we go.
Why not?
I apologize for that. Anyway, would be deemed uninhabitable, so that would keep a unit from, people just saying, well, I'm not gonna register at all, and continue to rent. Online registration and payment would be made available through the city's new software program. And then for those properties that have landlords that reside outside of Reno County, they would be required to have a resident agent if they lived more than 100 miles away. And the resident agent would be the person that would be responsible for ensuring registration, inspections, and repairs occur. As far as inspections, what we're proposing is that registered units would be inspected approximately once every 3 years, as I mentioned, and upon change of ownership. Should be noted that it probably won't be exactly on the 3 years because that would be really difficult, and sometimes the 3 year would fall on a Saturday, but the general cycle would be every 3 years. Inspectors will ensure compliance with the International Property Maintenance Code that the city's adopted, and the city actually modified that slightly, so we would be inspecting for compliance with the modified version. If a landlord had more than 2 rental units, a maximum of 1/3 of the landlord's units would be inspected annually unless the landlord wanted additional units inspected. So that could lessen the burden for landlords, especially if they have a lot of units. They could schedule their inspections online. For newly constructed units, the certificate of occupancy would count as the initial inspection, but registration would still be required. A $25 fee would be charged for missed inspections unless the first offense is, that should be, for a missed inspection, unless the first offense is initiated by the tenant. So if a tenant doesn't allow somebody into a unit, they would get a buy once. Because there's actions under state statute that landlords can take to make tenants allow people into their units. The results of the inspections, units that passed inspection would receive a certificate of rental compliance from the city. If a unit didn't pass inspection, it would receive a notice from the city, the landlord would, and given a maximum of 30 days to correct deficiencies. And inspection results will be posted on the city's website, and that we're thinking that would just be a pass and no pass, not a list of all the deficiencies. Reinspection would occur within 30 days. There would be no reinspection fee charged for the first reinspection, but a fee of $25 thereafter. So if a landlord corrected one thing on a list of 10, it wouldn't be reasonable for a inspector to keep going back and 10 times, let's just say, without charging the fee. If a unit did pass reinspection, they would receive a certificate of rental compliance from the city. And then for those units that did not pass the reinspection and hadn't made any progress, we would invoke our normal enforcement procedures. Those would also happen with uninhabitable dwellings. This part, conversions, is not in the proposed ordinance. It's just a way that planning proposes to handle. We know that there are some units out there that have been converted, single-family homes that have been converted to apartments or duplexes. If they meet the unit has cooking, restroom, and sleeping quarters, if they have enough off-street parking, and if they pass the IPMC inspection, staff proposes to just handle them as if they were grandfathered. But if they don't meet those requirements, then we would handle them via our normal enforcement procedures under the zoning regulations. And these would be units that are not in a multifamily zoning district. For any new conversions, so if someone owns a single-family house and they want to convert it to apartments, they'd have to meet the requirements of the ordinance and the building code. And then we have gone and talked to the landlords group, and one thing they asked for was the potential to have incentives. And so one incentive we're proposing is that if a unit on their initial inspection has less than five or fewer discrepancies, they could be placed on a 6-year cycle. So it's kind of an award, a 6-year inspection cycle. The unit still would need to be registered every year under our proposal. As far as estimated funding, we believe that the $25 inspection fee will about cover the cost of personnel, a vehicle, mailings, fuel, and office equipment. It's slightly higher, but we just don't really ever know until we get into a program how the revenue is actually going to come in. But we're proposing that if there's any additional revenue, it would be used for housing initiatives, and including demolitions. And then finally, the program includes an education component. We plan to educate tenants. You heard the fair housing seminar is going to be held this week. Part of that is education for landlords and tenants on the International Property Maintenance Code, as well as rights of either party. And then we're proposing that the program would be evaluated annually with a report to the City Council and the Housing Commission. And we have some success indicators. We think that we will see a decrease in IPMC complaints, a decrease in residential dwelling fires, increase in assessed valuations over time, a decrease in residential property-related crimes, and a decrease in of rental units that are in violation of the IPMC. So that's kind of the whole program in a nutshell. I did want to point out that Councilmember Soldner contacted me and requested that we consider changing the definition of, I gotta find it here, of a dwelling unit.
Mm-hmm.
To say dwelling unit means one room or a suite of 2 or more rooms designed for or used for living and sleeping purposes. Each of said units shall have a kitchen and it should say and restroom facilities. So that would keep, yeah, it just should say they also have to have a bathroom. And I just want to check to make sure I don't have June 31st in here. It's June 30th, is correct here. And that was all that I had for the presentation. I know Trent is here. He can answer any questions. I might be able to hopefully answer questions as well.
Does council have any questions for staff?
I've got a question, Jana, as it relates to, I guess, this definition of a dwelling. How will you intend to handle a duplex? Because a duplex will have common walls, common roofs, common sidewalks, common mechanicals. Do you intend to use dwellings as one dwelling with one inspection, or would both units come under the inspection requirement?
Each unit would be inspected separately. So they would have to register each side of the duplex.
But typically duplexes have bathrooms and kitchens on
Right.
both sides,
They're all
so
separate.
they would fall under the dwelling definition.
What we have seen out there is conversions where 3 or 4 different units are sharing the same bathroom. That's not allowed. That kind of congregate care would fall under a different category in the building code as well as in the zoning ordinance. And so that's why we wanted to define dwelling unit, to make sure that it has a bathroom, and that was a good catch like on Councilmember Soldner's part, and also has to have a kitchen. So a duplex, each side would have living, sleeping, kitchen, and restroom.
But from an inspector's standpoint, how do you distinguish or differentiate if there's an issue on a common wall or a common roof?
Are you assuming that each side of the duplex is owned independently or not owned by the same?
I'm assuming it's owned by the same party, by the same individual.
Okay.
Yeah, owned by the same party is different from like a townhome, which 2 different parties can own. The firewalls are different. We have seen plenty of duplexes and threeplexes that are not divided up like they should be. How we've always addressed in the past is a lot of these homes have been this way for 30, 40 years. We go and we look at what has been changed. We look at safety issues. Fire separation, we don't handle a whole lot of that unless we know it's just blatantly unsafe, and maybe penetrations through the walls or things that they've done over time that make us not feel comfortable with the way it sits. But there's plenty of walls and duplexes out there that we have just focused on life safety items. It would be near impossible on some of these to actually get a good firewall in there because of how the roof lines go and how the walls are in the house. And so there's some that, unfortunately, that's just the way they are, and that's how they'll stay unless they get remodeled or extensively remodeled some point in time in the future.
You don't believe you're penalizing that, that dwelling owner, that you're gonna require 2 inspections?
No, because it is based on the unit, so they could have 2 different families in there. It's still 2 units. It's all based on the unit. That's the easiest way for us to make it simple to enforce instead of based on if you have a 3-plex or 4-plex and we're going there for one $25 fee when we're inspecting 4 units that could range in size from 900 square feet to 2,000 square feet. Basing it on the unit to me is the simplest way to keep track and make it fair across the board, whether you've got 8 plex together or whatever.
I think maybe it seems a little more reasonable since it's not just an exterior inspection, but it's going into each individual unit
Yes.
and doing an inspection on the interior as well.
Well, I can tell you some of the landlords will not agree with that.
Sure.
They really take issue with that, particularly those that are really well maintained and they believe that they're being singled out.
We did look at other cities' ordinances, and none of them that we found distinguished between a duplex. They all count each side as a separate unit and inspect them the way that we're proposing. So I don't think there's any intent to single them out. They're just, each half would be a rental unit.
Okay.
Now, if the owner of the property lived in one side of the duplex, that unit that they lived in would not be inspected. It would be exempt.
It would be exempt. Okay.
Are there further questions for staff?
I've got a couple. I guess one response to John's comment is that the majority of the rental owners, I mean, I think you're going to be faced with kind of that 90-10 or 80-20 rule where, 80 or 90% are going to be just fine.
Yeah.
Because it is a business that people respect and take care of. But you do have some of the shadier operators, as we saw from the pictures today, that are basically, putting people into what I would consider subhuman conditions and unsafe conditions to live in. So I do think that they'll grinch about the initial one, but they'll fly right through it. The ones I think you'll hear the most complaints for are the ones that don't have plumbing, don't have electrical, that do have mold on the wall, that do have broken locks and windows, and you can see through the roof into the sky at night. I think those are the ones that are going to be the most upset because they'll have requirements put on them. So I do think there'll be some initial unhappiness, but I do believe that the people that pass through this will be the majority, and you won't spend much time with them again. So I don't have a problem with that. One of the issues that I had with, I should say it was an issue, one of the questions I had. So Trent, you're gonna, in theory, hire a new staff person that's gonna do the inspections with you. And what happens when you get behind? I mean, you've got like these 30 days and year notices, and so Inspector 1 breaks her ankle and Inspector 2 breaks his ankle, and it's you by yourself. So then and then we don't hire new staff because they're going to be coming back soon. They're just on short-term disability, and so staff is down to 1, and you have this backlog building, and that's not the responsibility of anybody but the city in the real world. So how is that going to be handled with these deadlines in the real world? So that, go ahead.
Well, worst case, if we lose all of our employees and it's just me, then we'll have to
To
go visit
broken ankles.
with HR and John to get some temp help in here. But our other inspectors are doing the inspections currently. So if they needed to fill in, that's what we do. On anyone takes a vacation day or time off, we all cover each other's positions. I'll go out in the field and inspect. So it'll be how we always have handled it. Worst case, they all go down, then we'll probably looking for some temp help to come in to help cover the inspections.
But you don't have something built into this to give yourself like a 30-day
Well,
grace
all the-
period that staff can say, we can't reasonably get to your place on this time period, so we're going to give you a grace period and reschedule it?
It's noted in the ordinance that we'll follow our current operating procedures. 30 days is every notice that we send out unless there's specific life safety, maybe there's no furnace, we're in the middle of the winter, we'll put a couple days notice on it, on our letter. 30 days is just our standard that will go out on any letter, no matter what the violation is. Sometimes we don't get in 30 days. It's around 30 days. We make contact. In some cases, the landlord will request that they can vacate the premise first so they can get in and get the significant repairs done. And so we'll work with them on that. 30 days is just our standard. It may be 45 days. It may be 32 days. They might call me after a week and say, hey, we're done. Come back in. So there'll be some scheduling that the inspector will have to work with the landlord and try to work that out. A lot of the times on some of the pictures that you saw, we don't get calls back. And so then we are calling the landlord after the 30 days and saying your time is up. You need to get back in and inspect it. And that's where we have some of the challenges, and those are some of the cases that we take through the municipal court process because of the unwillingness or communication from the landlords that we're dealing with.
Okay.
Okay. Do we have any other questions right now for staff? Because I think we've got people in the audience that would like to address us. And assuming that's correct, do we have anyone in the audience that would like to address the council on this issue? Please come to the podium and state your name and share your thoughts.
You don't want my thoughts.
And please limit them to no more than 5 minutes.
I understand the rules. I'm Ray Siebert. I'm from Pretty Prairie, Kansas. Try to keep a sense of humor about it and be positive about something that, of course, I'm not real excited about. It's not often people, and most of you don't know me that well, try to set up something using my management style, which is with a lot of brute force. Didn't mind the complaint-based process at all, and not enthused at all about this process. Would ask that I would say I've got a good working relationship with Trent. It's always scary when a government agency builds something that needs a lot of exceptions around an individual, because too many times somebody else can come in and decide to enforce that to the letter of the law, and that can get real tough. While they've pointed out that several communities in Kansas have this, only really 2 communities do, and that's Lawrence and one large community which involves several smaller communities within that same general area. That's Lawrence and Kansas City. For some reason, Johnson County for the most part, for some reason Hutchinson has decided they can't use the positive or easier going management style of the other communities in the whole state. It's concerning that while Hutchinson wants to continue to grow and be positive, they do things that would negatively impact people who would look at, do I really want to invest in a place that is going to approach their rental program this way. Since I only have 5 minutes, if you'll all remember how well the fire inspections went, and the city gave up on that process because of a lot of problems, mostly complaints. I would like to see an appeal process that didn't involve the courts. Through Trent, I don't think I'll have a problem, but for instance, we have one building with $200 antique doorknobs in a metal frame. If you kick it in, you will lose the door, not the frame anyway. We would really hate to have to go put deadbolts in those. We also have units that it's impossible to make windows that open, and I don't know how soon you would enforce something like that, but the last I read the code, certain windows had to open in an apartment, and the last I read it, all of them had to
How do they get out in a fire if the windows don't open?
They're not going through the windows in this building anyway. I've got 2 of them that are several stories tall. They better hope the fire department shows up. But they're not going out through the windows. I'm not talking about escape exits. I mean, those need to be there. I'm talking about exceptions. I said it's an exception that I would need to have. It's not a life safety issue. Occupied inspections are going to be an issue. I would like to see a provision for dormant units. We have several units that we will register if this passes. We will register those units, but they haven't been occupied for years. They're on our when employees aren't busy, we'll go work on them. But they were down so far that we just plain don't rent them out. With the understanding I have, they probably do need to be registered, but we certainly wouldn't want them inspected and wouldn't want them penalties because we don't want them inspected. They're not going to pass an inspection. They may not have a toilet because we've torn it out so we can redo the floor. So inspecting it's pointless, and the reinspection obviously wouldn't happen in 30 days because we don't intend to work on it.
Those would be uninhabitable.
I would, well, no, right now they're uninhabitable, but we
Yeah.
don't want them on that. The problem is you've got an uninhabitable list and you intend to take action against those. We don't want to lose the whole building. We just don't want that building inspected, and we don't want it to be taken off the list. We eventually want to make it a viable apartment.
Trey, could you kind of address that? Are they getting a certificate of occupancy or something after the inspection? So that type of
Yeah.
unit just wouldn't get a certificate.
That's
Therefore,
right.
it just
It's
wouldn't
kind of what
be.
Nancy said.
Yeah.
We would note it either up front, if it's not occupied and it's in the
Yeah.
conditions he mentions as uninhabitable. When they do the repairs and make those things on it, we can include that. They'll still be registered like what was mentioned, but we don't need to do, my opinion, we do not need to do an inspection because it's already noted that it's not habitable. And that's our whole goal of this is what is habitable, what is not, what is not, can it get brought up to minimum requirements. In Ray's case, he's not even focusing on them, so there's no need to go through the process of violations.
So the landlord's telling you up front, I don't intend to rent this, therefore you don't need to come check it at that point anyway. Now, does that feed into any kind of a database or anything that we also don't want that landlord to look like they have negative dings against them when it's not a rental unit that they're even trying to rent. It's not that they've got bad units, this isn't
Sure.
even on the market.
You know, we haven't thought through that part of it. I don't know if we just list it as uninhabitable or maybe not. We'd have to list a unit as a registered unit regardless. So whether we use the word of pass or no pass or pass or fail or.
Because I think
you
there's
know.
a difference in, I'm trying to rent this, but it's uninhabitable versus this is just not even on the market at this point in time.
Yeah, we'll have to look at it if there's a better definition that works for those situations that he's mentioned. Those haven't come up in any of our discussions, so we haven't even thought of it. The pass or fail was the simplest way to try not to get into the fine detail of why the unit did not pass or,
Yeah.
you know.
I guess
so-
I would just not want a potential renter to look at it and think that's a bad landlord when in actuality, maybe
Yeah.
100% of their rentable units were in good shape.
Yeah, there could be just a simple definition that we put on there that is, you know, we'll have to look through that. I don't know what
Work
one
in
would be,
progress.
but it would be challenging to do that, so
Just,
we
yeah.
can do it. Pass or fail to me would make sense on the ones that are occupied, the ones we are working with and going through, but.
I
in
do
this
think we
case-
would need a designation though, so people wouldn't try to rent those. Because those could still be rented out if they weren't under failed.
Well, except they wouldn't have their certificate.
Correct.
That
They
gives
wouldn't
them-
have their certificate of compliance for that unit. And on our website or whatever, we can maybe come up with a short definition for this situation that he brought up. I think would be fair and reasonable.
Well, actually, his term dormant units is not a bad term, because it means basically that it is something that at some point in time you're gonna bring back into the market, but right now it is dormant. And so it's not occupiable, nor are we going to inspect it for that reason.
Yeah, and I think we'll have others that are, if we use that term dormant, which is fine by me. In Ray's case, we know that he's gonna get to those someday. They're part of, or they're part of multiple units. We're gonna have some that people have just walked away from that,
Yeah.
have no activity with them.
And that was my concern, was that there was a distinction between that and the ones that they walked away from.
Yeah.
That was kind of my concern, the single families that people walked away from. And I'm not concerned about a fail on those. That really doesn't bother me. One of the things, and you can find plenty of negative comments about us as a landlord. We have just a little too much, and we're aware of that. We own just a little too much of the Hutch rental market. We'd much rather have the number of units we have in a larger community. And we've taken steps to not have them all here, but the two more quick points, because my 5 minutes, I think, was finished by Trent, is
Well, we won't.
is two more quick points. We won't rent a unit.
Come to the mic.
Sorry. I talk loud. I'm sure everybody in the room heard me, but probably not the ones that. We won't rent a unit that I won't move into when we rent it. We will run into a couple of units we have a problem with. There's no question. We will have the tenants move when they come up from inspection, because they will need that much work at this point. But when we rent a unit originally, I'd move into it. It's clean, generally repainted, or hasn't been reoccupied within the last year, and we haven't painted it. The other thing, and it is negative, and I hesitate to bring it up, but we do intend to pass this charge on. When a tenant rents an apartment for us, it's going to be like when you buy a car and they have the administrative fee. We will have an inspection fee when they sign up for the lease. They will pay us the deposit, and then they will have an additional inspection fee of $25 added to it, and then we will charge them that again yearly on their lease, so they know exactly where that money's going to. But thank you for your time.
Right.
Hold on.
Obviously, I
Yeah.
would just assume you didn't pass this, but I think you already knew
I
that.
What do you normally charge? I mean, just pick an average monthly rate.
400.
400. Okay.
That's probably a little high. 350.
Okay, 350. I mean, I could tell you that if I was renting from you and it only cost me $25 to have a professional come in and check everything and make sure it was all safe and clean and great, and then I was writing you a check for $350 a month, I think that's a good deal. So I think that's a pretty good deal, just $25 a year, to make sure that everything is up and running. Because I don't know anything about electricity. I mean, I don't know. I don't know anything about plumbing, but I do know that Trent does, and his people do. And I think that's really where we keep hearing this argument of, we're just going to make it harder for people to live here because we're going to pass it on to them. Well, you're not. You're going to make it easier for them to live there because they're going to have a better living environment for the mere price of $25 a year. So I think it's a good deal.
Partly you go back to what you're saying about do you do 2 complaint inspections on my units a year? I don't think it's that high. You're not coming after me. For the most part, we're in pretty good shape. We know some areas, the first 3 years, we're probably going to have some people picking up some stuff that Trent and I already know we have disagreements on, and once he gets the opportunity to go in them every year, I can tell you one is sticks in sliding glass doors. It's used all over the world for a sufficient lock, and the last I knew, I hadn't swayed Trent on whether that was sufficient or not. But and if he decides it's not sufficient, I'll be installing somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 locks on sliding glass doors, because you can't, on the doors they put in those rentals, you can't keep the original locks working. You can't even find parts for them. The nationally accepted way of doing that is with a stick in the door, but I don't think the code takes it, and then Trent's real slow to go outside of that area. But thank you for your time.
Well, hold on, Ray.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I just wanted to address, I've heard a few comments about this being overreach, and whether there's always debate when new rules are brought to council or new ordinances about the role of government, and does this fall under something the council should even be talking about. But I think that the safety of the citizens is inarguably the purview of government, and I see this as a public safety issue. I want everyone to remember that this ordinance is not designed to address small cosmetic issues. It's merely asking landlords to abide by all the safety and health regulations and codes already in place. And that includes addressing major structural issues, unsafe plumbing, and the unsafe electrical practices that led to an enormous amount of fires this past winter, including the death of the one that caused the death of an 8-year-old child over Christmas weekend, that I think arguably could have been prevented. So I feel like it's an ethical obligation of the council to pursue this, and it's a public safety issue. And I know that in the presentation there wasn't a lot of time to go over the background. Do you mind if I take a few minutes? The condition of our housing stock, I just want to remind everybody, if you've forgotten, and of rental properties in particular, is continuing to decline. In 2001, the city commissioned a study to assess the value of every single property in this town, both rentals and owner-occupied. They repeated that study in 2009, and in that 8-year period, it was found that 5,000 of the 18,000 properties in town had declined significantly and in condition. And it's my understanding that many of those, maybe even a majority of those that had declined, were rentals. So we have nearly 30%, that's staggering to me, nearly 30% of Hutchinson's housing stock is now rated for fair, poor, or unsound. And that study is on the city website if you want to read it. It's about 215 pages, so you can read it at night. Additionally, I wanted to remind people that a 2013 community study, that's one completed by Hutchinson residents, showed that the residents are completely fed up with the disinvestment of rentals in their neighborhood and the corresponding effect it has on their property values. So I think it's easy for us to forget these things as they pass and we don't move on them, and then we think we don't have an issue. But both the formal studies and the citizen input offered a very large message to council, and that's do something about it. Because if we don't take steps to address the decline in our housing standards, this downward spiral will continue. It's not fun. I mean, it's never fun to add to city, payrolls. It's never fun to hurt the people who are providing or affect the people who are providing this valuable service, because the majority of our landlords do provide very good maintenance, very good management of their properties. And this is going to affect them as well as the people who aren't meeting just very bare minimum living standards. But I just don't, I think if we don't act on it, then nothing's ever going to change. So.
Thank you, Jade. Those are some good points to be reminded of.
I'd like to respond to one of those,
Okay.
and that you've targeted one particular group.
And Ray, you're absolutely right.
You stated that housing stock is deteriorating, and I don't disagree with anything you've said, other than you've targeted a specific group when you could have gone after all of them. You have complete ability to do that without this ordinance. You can go after the individual families, you can go after the individual homeowners, you can do it all without this ordinance and be fair with it straight across. And if you are, you will target a whole lot of individual homeowners before you, if you're talking about quality of units, before you even get to the property I own.
Ray, I agree that this does nothing to address the owner-occupied issues. I agree with that.
Because we don't own any of those 5,000 deteriorating units. We don't own any of those that are deteriorating.
None of your properties were on that list of
None of our
properties that had
properties are
declined.
worse than they were when I bought them. They are all improved.
I think some of the.
We have not bought a property, that's not true. I can show you one on West Fifth. We have not bought a property we've worked on that we've not improved. Some of them not much. The Dillons own some stuff up on north of 30th. They were in real good shape when we bought them. We used to say we were the cleanest landlords in town. Once we bought those out, we found out we were wrong. But we're now, again, we'll say we're the cleanest landlords in town. Large landlords. Mom and pops beat us all to heck. The cleanest large landlords in town. But we now own those, so they're clean too. And we're keeping
And Ray,
clean.
kind of
But
addressing,
our stuff's
in
clean.
targeting a group, this is a group that is conducting a business, that is making money from this business. And so I think that's also part of the starting with that being the targeted group, is that it is a business, and we have people who will say, well, I can't afford to repair it. And the reality is they are in a business, and so they need to conduct it as a business.
And nobody's gonna feel sorry for Ray Siebert if they look at the tax rolls. And they shouldn't feel sorry for me. The rental business has treated me well. I would make more money, which makes it interesting why I'm here. I would make more money if I could invest my money at 5%, I'd be better off watching TV at home, not even taking wages. I don't pay myself, and I don't make 5% on what we have invested on a yearly basis. So we're not making a ton of, I shouldn't say we're not getting rich off of it.
Okay,
One of us at least did reasonably well off of it, so I don't want to say I didn't. But it's not as lucrative as you might think.
I wanted to take you back real quick to a statement you made in the beginning about the differentiation between how we're implementing this policy versus like Lawrence and Johnson County, and you implied that we are more punitive or taking more negative approach. Can you define what you mean by that?
No, I said those are the only two communities in the state that are doing the type of program they claim there's 10 cities. You've claimed there's 10 cities, but there's not. There's 2 communities. There may be 10 cities, but there's only 2 communities that have chosen to do that.
There are
And that's-
several communities that do exterior, but we know that the majority of complaints received
Well,
are
but
interior.
no, I'm not saying you're being more punitive than any of
Okay,
them.
I
I
misunderstood.
want it, or I misspoke, but I never like to see it happen this way, but right now with the inspection staff you have, and I would like to see an appeal process of a committee one step above Trent besides the courts, because on some of this stuff, we're not afraid to go to court on, but I really don't want to approach it that way. But there's going to be a couple of issues that Trent and I probably don't agree on that we would both appreciate a referee on, as opposed to him having to sue me.
You know, and we have discussed that in the past and how to set up some kind of, I think it's called environmental court, like they have in Wichita, so it doesn't clog up our municipal court. But I don't think we're there yet. I think that's a good conversation to have, though, Mr. Siebert. I think you bring up a good point.
Okay,
So Trent, would you stand up and talk about, thank you, Ray, talk about what Ray's comments about, the an appeal process or something. How do you handle those, other than just once you two disagree or agree to disagree, where does it go? What happens?
Well, a couple things. One, on the deadlocks, the term, because that's been a misconception even in Housing Commission meetings, that term was taken away back in 2011 through all the community meetings that was discussed before the code was adopted. It talks about specifically the mechanism associated with the hardware. So to me, if you've got a doorknob that has a lock on it, that will suffice. It's the makeshift locks, pins and so forth that are not part of the mechanism of the hardware of the door that would not fit the criteria. Our appeals process, first, and I've known Ray for a long time, and I've inspected his properties, and my inspectors have inspected his properties. The inspectors are the ones that do the inspection. I'm only there if I'm filling in. So the initial appeal would come to me, and if it's something that we disagree on, what I've done with some is taking them through the municipal court, because there is no other person above me that is going to make a judgment call on the code. People have gone to John, and John will come back and refer to me again on, what does the code say and what is the correct decision on this. So the judge has been very fair and reasonable. If there's a different process that we need to look at, it would probably be the environmental court, and that'd be someone very specific or narrow focused onto these items. But short of that, it's just through the regular municipal court process.
okay.
Apparently Ray wants to have a rebuttal.
I'm supposed to speak into this. I'm still Ray Siebert. I'm still from Pretty Prairie.
All right, we're still here.
Want to make it clear with Trent, I'm not expecting a lot of disagreements with Trent. We've always managed to work it out, and it's not always been, he's made some compromises that probably wouldn't have been his choice if he'd taken out the hammer instead of the carrot. But there are cases where there's enough, and I didn't catch your full answer on the locks. on any issue, unfortunately, like sliding glass doors, if we don't get along, we're talking possibly 150. So there's quite a bit at stake for me if what he demands is gonna cost me $200 a door. I'd really rather not to go to, and part of Trent's problem is he's in a liability situation all by himself. Because if he says, okay, Ray, that will work, it's not in writing here, but I'll take it upon myself to let it work, then all of you guys are gonna say, Trent, where were you when this building burnt down?
So I
Because-
think you've just come full circle on answering why.
No, but that's why there needs to be an appeal, because there needs to be a board that says this is reasonable, so it doesn't go back to one person. And so that we don't have to go to court to let a judge try to determine it, because some of it.
So that's something that the future council can.
Yeah, and I am not
look at and
opposed
see if it's,
to
if it has merit, or is needed.
I do want to make it.
But as you're saying, city staff really does try hard to work with people, and it's not just a heavy-handed ruling over things.
For the
It
most
really
part,
is trying to.
I would compliment Clint and his crew. There's always disagreements when one or both parties may have, it didn't go the way they wanted it to, and he doesn't have, I can't say that's ever happened with Trent, but some of his staff didn't handle it the way Trent would have liked them to have handled it, but it was resolved with at least the next time they came out, they didn't express any hard feelings. They were perfectly reasonable with
So
how
I
they-
think you can expect that same.
No, I do.
Same communication, same thing to go on in the future, and as Jade said, I think the future council may look at whether there needs to be another level of appeal process in there. So,
Because the point isn't to punish people who are offering a really valuable service to our community. The point is just to protect individuals who are loath to complain about really unsafe conditions for fear of being kicked out. And, you know, one of my biggest concerns when we started discussing this was possible displacement issues. People living in really poorly maintained properties, but at a low level of rent, that maybe couldn't afford to live in that place or another place if the landlord didn't fix that place up. And so we are not looking to put landlords out of business and potentially people out of their homes. That's a concern. We want to do whatever we can to facilitate proper maintenance so that people are safe. That's all this is about, is public safety.
Trent, could you stand up and could you pull up that picture of the house with the mold again?
Could I address, the one thing is that you stated, and I just want to make sure we're clear. The person living in the poorly maintained, dilapidated house, they're going to lose their place of residence under this program. Just so you know, you're going to make some people homeless. That's part of what this, because you can consider.
but as Jade pointed out,
Right.
The worst case scenario did happen in our community. And we don't want ever to see that happen again by saying, well, we don't want anyone to be displaced by holding up a standard of housing that they might not have a fire that kills a child.
Well, and that's the most egregious one. I mean, this is the one that bothers me the most. When we looked at this program back in, was it 2008?
8, did you say?
2009.
Well, when we first came with the first property maintenance codes, they showed us lots of pictures of mold. And I hope, you know, you get this on the internet. I hope the Hutch News takes a picture of it and puts it on the paper. And I hope the radio people describe it as best as they can. Because this, to me, is the biggest issue. Because mold is something that you breathe in. It affects you daily. You have children playing around it. It's a real, honest-to-God, live, easy-to-understand public health issue. And this is just the latest picture I've seen, and I'm sure Trent could go get me more pictures of this. You know, I don't think it's, I don't want people living in a rental spot that has mold in it. I don't want their kids breathing every day. So if they have to be shut down and those folks have to go someplace else for their own well-good, I'm okay with that. Is this program overreaching? Is it too much government? You know what? I'm kind of libertarian a little bit on some of that stuff because it probably is. But if we have to inspect, you know, so many thousand houses to identify 25 or 30 families that we can help protect, using those dollars and resources and city staff so we don't have kids and people breathing this, I guess I'm gonna have to be okay with that. Just like I'm not okay with somebody selling food that's tainted, I'm not comfortable with somebody selling a product that is tainted. And this is tainted and has a real health risk, and we need to stop it. And so, if that means that we're gonna be called names and if we're gonna be, considered domineering, I'm okay with that.
Well, and like
we
what
need to
Bob's
stop
saying,
this.
this isn't isolated. This isn't just, oh gosh, we got mold in our home. This trickles out into so many areas. I mean, you've got the child, then they're sick, then there's medical costs. I mean, this costs society in a much larger way than just, gee, there's a poorly
Right.
kept home. It trickles its way out into many areas. But we may have other individuals that would like to address council on this.
I'd like to ask Trent, what percent of the mold issues are caused by the landlord?
Might repeat the question so people can hear it on TV.
He asked what percentage of mold is a direct cause from the landlord. Most of the ones that we get in probably actually are roof leaks, plumbing leaks. There are cases where they don't run their air conditioning. Air conditioning naturally will help get rid of any humidity inside the house. Some find maybe a more efficient way they want to live their life in their apartment, but we find leaks all the time. I've got pictures, well, in my presentation for the fair housing that the gentleman called me up, opened the door, did not even move one single box in, bought it or rented the place. The landlord said it was in great shape, ready to go. And there were roof leaks. The wall was bowed out, the toilet didn't work, the tub didn't work, and the sink was broken. And yet the landlord thought it was sufficient to, and it was a college student, so he probably found their phone number online or something and called them and went there, and he was appalled. So after my inspection, he was going to go back and try to get his lease back or his down payment. So the ones that we look at, I would say most of them are probably by the landlord, but there are some that are probably caused by the tenant, and we'll probably work through those, and we can decipher in a lot of cases what is tenant fault and what is landlord fault. In some case, we don't know, and we're just going to note it as a violation.
I think it's really difficult for people who are good landlords to wrap their brain around why on earth we're doing this, because they don't hear stories like that, and they can't even imagine. And why are they being penalized in their eyes because of this? Well, because we have to root it out. We have to do them all, so that we can find these issues.
That's right.
Do we have anyone else in the audience that would like to address council on this? Please come forward and state your name. I'm going to make a promise for the council we won't badger you.
Raymond Hernandez, 904 East 7th. I feel like you're targeting a few of us that are, I have rental properties and I've never had no problem. I keep them up, just like Ray said, if I'm going to rent it, like if I'm going to live in it. And sometimes my wife says, are we moving in? But I feel that this ordinance that you have, that you want to pass, is targeting us, but it's really targeting the people that don't take care of them, the rental properties. I feel that you need to go after them. We have ordinance already in place with the city that they can come and inspect them. And I feel like I retired and I bought these properties for kind of an income, for something for me to do. But with this ordinance, I feel like I'm gonna have to pass the cost to the renter, and I'm trying to keep my rental property affordable. Insurance goes up, taxes go up. I try not to raise them, but with all these other things coming in, we're gonna have to do something. It's gonna have to be passed to somebody,
Well, and I think that's already been stated. I think there's a realization that a lot of this cost will pass through, whether it's an increase in the monthly rent, which, was a couple dollars a month. But the reality is, even a very low income person, $25 is a lot less expensive to have a home that you can live in and live in long term than to get into something and immediately have to move and rehook up all your utilities and just the cost of moving. There's a lot of cost associated to a move.
Okay, the other thing I want to bring up is you guys don't see the cost of somebody tearing something up. You know, and we have to, and I'll repair it, whatever it takes, you know. But I don't try to pay, you know, I try to keep the cost down on my rent, but sometimes I have to raise it up a little bit because of the way they left it. The deposit doesn't take care of it.
Right. And we
And-
recognize.
Yeah, and that's within your right, and that's what you should do.
Yes.
There's no question about it. And not to overtake Cindy, but to me, this program actually rewards those of you who are good landlords, because you have that certificate that says, I am providing a place for someone to live that is healthy, that is safe, that's been inspected. And so to me, you're getting a whole lot more positives by the fact that you are part of this program than negatives.
I know, but it's just like I said, we're trying to keep our costs down on renting, and then we have subsidized programs with some of the rent that we have, and we're not passing that on. I mean, we don't get that kickback.
Yeah, no,
You
I
know,
understand that.
You know, and I just feel like this goes on. I mean, I just feel like I'll just sell and move somewhere else. I mean,
So wait a minute. So you're telling me that
$25.
that instead of, rather than charge somebody $25 a year, you'll tell them just not to rent with you?
well, I feel like if I want to keep the rent down,
No. If you charge someone $25,
Or $2 a month.
$25
Yeah, $2 a month.
for a year,
yes.
that's going to make your rental unaffordable.
No, but I'm saying
Okay,
that.
so real quick, now you're talking about all the other costs that it takes to be a business owner in this business, and that is bad renters, torn up property, and all the rest of that. That's not what this council's talking about. This council is simply talking about $25 1 year, so that you can then use it as a selling tool to go out to renters and say, this has been inspected by the city. To me, that's a pretty good deal, sir.
Yes, but okay. But what I'm saying, we're creating a new job, but we have inspectors here now in the city, right?
Yes.
That come and inspect. Why do we need to create a new job for that?
We're creating a mechanism that there will be an inspection across the board, that we're not just spotty, we're not just catching the most egregious, that, you know, we have some that are probably very egregious that never do get caught and they continue to rent. So it's creating a method. It's like many rules, many laws that is unfortunately, because of the actions of a few, that everyone ends up having to abide by a rule or a law. And so
And
I
people-
think that's what's happening.
There are comments about how mechanisms are already in place for us to deal with this. All renters need to do is complain, and they'll get an inspection, and they're not going to complain. You know, I've been on the board of New Beginnings. This is my 7th year, and I've been involved with Circles of Hope for 2 years, and I hear it all the time. People who live in properties that are substandard, especially if they have families, they're terrified to complain because they're not aware of their rights. They don't want to be kicked out. They'd rather just live with the mold. And I'm not saying that it's all on the landlords. I know that tenants can be problematic, but as Bob mentioned, well, you know, that's part of being in the business. That's why I'm not in the rental business, and bless you and Ray and everyone else who is. But in every business, there are standards, there are rules and regulations. And if standards aren't being met, we need a way to fix it.
And to know that those standards aren't being met. Otherwise, we have no idea what's behind, you know, the closed door.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in the audience that would like to address council on this issue? Morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good.
My name's Titus Utzi. I'm from 205 North Main, and yeah, I like Hutchinson and everything it has to offer for a young person. I do have a couple rental houses in Hutch, and I have some in South Hutch. There's a couple issues that I'd like to bring up. Some of them have already been stated, but one of the issues is my tenants are private people. I don't go in their house unless they call me with a problem. Sometimes I don't go in their house for a year. We're asking the tenants to open their door and let us in, let the government in, walk through everything. plus my tenants have jobs. If we ask them if the inspection is agreed on, you know, I don't know what the business hours are going to be, but let's say the inspection's at 3 o'clock. I show up from, you know, because rental business is my only business. I show up at 3 o'clock. City inspector shows up at 3 o'clock. My tenant's a no-show. He's at work. Couldn't make it. Sick kid, whatever. How are we going to, yeah. And sometimes tenants tell you they're going to be somewhere and they might not be. How are we going to deal with that? Like, we show up 2 or 3 times. Am I going to get penalized as the landlord because my tenant can't make it? And also, how can we legally enter a house if my tenant doesn't want to stay?
I think Jana might be able to, she addressed that a little bit in that the first missed inspection, if it's due to the tenant, you won't be penalized. And so she can probably elaborate on that.
Yes, under state statute, landlords actually have they can give 24-hour notice and they're allowed to go into a unit. So, but we've built it into where for the first inspection, if for whatever reason the tenant doesn't allow us in, you wouldn't be assessed a fee. Then beyond that, you would have to invoke the state statute to force them to allow you in. And you may have to, in some cases, remove a tenant from a unit. We would hate to have that happen. I don't think that's going to happen very often, but if there's a reason why a tenant doesn't want somebody in a unit, you might have to remove them.
Right, and hopefully with the understanding, and I don't know if maybe our inspection unit can potentially even have a flyer, something to help the individual understand we're not there to assess their personal living style. We're looking at very specific things of plumbing and electricity and for mold, we're looking
Once
for
every 3
building
years.
code things once every 3 years. So it's not someone coming in on a regular basis. We're not looking at, their cleanliness or how they're living. Those aren't concerns of the city.
Okay.
And if there were a complaint to be lodged from one of your renters today, we would do the same.
Right.
Even without this program, we would go into their private space and,
But they lodged the complaint. They wanted
Yeah.
you there.
yeah, but this is once every 3 years. And there again, I can probably guess, Mr. UC, that you are not one of the problems. And so it's probably very frustrating to you. It's
Yeah.
very frustrating, like Cindy said. Few people cause us to have to
Yeah.
assess this to everyone.
And then another question I had was that you have 30 days to do the repair. It depends on which time of the summer I call my electrician or my plumber. If it's not an emergency, yeah, we can work it in 30 days, but we're going to have to decide. We've got to go out and evaluate what we want to do, how we want to do it. The repair's got to be done in 30 days. Sometimes on a big repair, that might not be possible.
Trent can address that
yeah.
he's a pretty workable guy.
Like I said earlier, if it's life safety issues, if it's the furnace, if it's the water heater, I went to a property where they had no gas for 11 months, and she boiled water on the stove to bathe her kids. Those types of situations we find, we're going to give them 2 or 3 days, whatever the severity of the violation is. Our standard is a 30-day notice on our letter stating 30 days to comply. Landlords will call us, and Ray can attest to this, but they will call us and say, hey, I can't get in there, or I've got all this work to do, work with me on it. If you give me a couple more weeks, or I'm going to vacate it because really I've got so much to do, I can't do it with the tenant in there, or maybe the tenant is irate and they're not easy to deal with contractors. We've heard that before. We'll do our best to work with you. The 30 days is just a standard. It's a standard for us to go and re-inspect, but if you're communicating with us on the problems and when your contractors can get in to fix it, as long as it's not one of those severe issues, then we'll be fine working on those times. So as long as it's not, come back in 6 months and, just blowing us off, we'll be reasonable as long as they're reasonable.
So biggest thing is just communicating back to the city what's kind of going on.
Also, another question. I heard some debate on if the landlords are going to be able to do the repairs themselves. Let's say a small plumbing issue or whatever.
And again, Trent might address that.
We've talked about that in the Housing Commission and with staff. There is no state license yet. What the request or comment came was a handyman certification. There are things that the landlord can and can't do. A lot of your trades, electrical, mechanical, and plumbing items are protected by even state statute to have a licensed contractor do those repairs. In any case, I would ask the landlord to ask us and tell us what they're doing, if it's something they can do, and we can determine from there if they can or can't.
All right, those are a couple questions I had. Thanks for answering those. And as a young person, you know, making investments in this town, this is going to go, you know, this is part of my, you know, do I want to invest in Hutchinson if we're going to nitpick everything I buy as a rental properties? And so, you know, it's not just for, I understand where you're coming from and the mold, we have mold pictures up here, but, you know, I'd say that's a really worst case scenario. I don't believe there's
I
that
wish
much
it
mold
were,
in every house.
but
So-
I'm afraid it's not, and I think you would be astonished at how poor of conditions we have a lot of people living in. So I'm glad to hear that you don't think that's okay, and that you have invested in Hutch and will continue hopefully to do so. And we're not trying to nitpick you. Hopefully, as Bob has said, this will actually serve as a positive to good landlords to give you that certification for when people are out looking for a rental, they'll recognize, oh, this person has that certificate, they must be good, that it'll actually turn into a positive for you to draw new residents.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
But you're so concerned you're letting us pay for it.
I have a
It's your
feeling your renter's
business,
going to
isn't it?
pay for it.
Isn't it your business? Or-
Well, it seems like this is a conversation that Ray ought to
Yeah.
have with the housing board, and not kind of onesie-twosies throwing stuff at us from the gallery.
And do we have another individual that'd like to address the council?
Steve Decken, 521 East Sherman, Hutchinson. I wasn't planning on addressing the council, but as a landlord, I guess a mom and pop would be the way to describe me, but as the landlord for the last 20-some years, I want to stand up and tell you that I do support the rental inspection program. Do I think it's going to work flawlessly? No. I think some of the questions raised today indicate that there are probably going to be some kinks that come along the way, and I would hope that the future council is willing to look at making some modifications as some experience is gained. I stood up 4 years ago as a landlord and also supported the International Property Maintenance Code, and so that's why I'm here, wanting again as a landlord to support this. There are a couple of points I want to comment on, not necessarily that they are new points. Council member Jade talked about displacement and the possibility of that. That's a concern I've had all along, and it's not a concern that I raised to say that it should not be passed, but I'm hoping that, to the degree possible, that the city will recognize and be involved, I guess is the word. I think that there are a number of people that are just on the borderline, and that, not that the $25 a year would do it, but that if there is property improvement, there's going to be an increase in the rent most likely, and that there are going to be folks that are going to be displaced. And I think that's something that needs to be thought about. It's just a concern that I've had all along with it. I do want to comment. I don't think that $25 is too much for a tenant or a landlord. If my business was going to turn one way or another on $2 a month, I probably ought to take a look at my business plan. So I don't think that $25 a year is too much. The issue also was raised that certainly why is this falling on the backs of landlords? I think that there has to be a starting point, and given that a number of rental properties are significantly the problem, that this is a good place to start. But I would also hope that the council in future years continues to make it a point to address housing issues, because, and there are a number of owner-occupied that probably fall into these areas. Then the problem becomes even more difficult to deal with, because you're talking about folks probably that are on fixed incomes and can't afford to fix their furnaces and do a number of things. Council member Jade.
Yeah. We go that route too.
Yeah.
Thank you. Talked about new beginnings, and I've been involved with interfaith housing, and yes, there's loads of people that just can't afford to keep their own property up. So I would hope that the council continues to address those things. I do want to say there have been some good points made by both of the Rays, and my good friend Ray Hernandez, I didn't realize was in the rental business. I tend to keep my rents low as well, but I also recognize I have a business, and as taxes, as insurance, as things increase, if I need to make either I absorb that or I go ahead and increase the rents to stay in business. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Thanks, Steve.
Good morning.
Good morning. Chad Harris, 3217 East Middle Lake. As most of you guys know, I'm all for increasing values in Hutchinson. I don't know if this is the right direction. What's going to happen is I feel like landlords are going to move out of the southern areas because the houses are neat in shape, and it's just going to decrease the values even more. Councilmember Bush, you had mentioned that's a horrible picture, I understand. But do you know where that's from?
Trent.
I don't either.
Trent shows me all kinds of nasty pictures.
You know where that picture is? What that picture is? Just look.
Do
at
you
the
mean
picture.
what created it or
What created
where in the city it's?
I would. I've seen, unfortunately, I've had bad tenants that have caused problems like this, and you know, that is an issue. So, you know, I'm having to fix it for the tenant. I'm having to do things like that. I recently sold a property on Avenue A because I knew this was going to come in effect. Hopefully, maybe it won't, but I just don't want to deal with this. And I see a lot of other landlords looking at the same thing. They're looking at getting rid of properties. My next issue, and Trent's done a great job. I've worked with Trent in the past on different occasions, and he does a great job what he does, but I'm worried about the guy who's taking Trent's job. Trent's a very, very bright individual. Unfortunately, I don't think he's going to be here much longer. Maybe.
Trent.
I hope he does. I hope he does. But
Just because he has no hair does not mean he's old.
But he is a very bright individual, and he's going to be looking for bigger and better, I feel. And but he, you know,
Trent
I'm
is
looking out
happy
for the
here.
next guy. I'm looking out for the next guy. He may not be as nice as what we have here. So again, that's what I'm worried about. I do still own a lot of rentals. I asked 3 of my tenants recently. I said, "Do you know that you can file a complaint against me?" Nope, we never knew that. I never knew that till about a year ago, that there was a place in the city. I think you need to educate the people that there is a spot where you can complain. I didn't even know about it. I've owned rental properties for 15 years. I never knew that there was a place you can complain with the city. Again, I asked 3 renters. I said, "Did you know there was a place you can complain about sanitation issues and stuff like that?" They didn't know.
So, in that vein, and think about it this way, you're probably a person who is a little more in tune with certain medias, watching the news, maybe seeing the newspaper. We have a lot of renters. By the time you're renting in a certain level of housing, you're not probably getting the newspaper. You're not necessarily seeing the news. How to reach you can be exceptionally difficult. They're not always tapped into certain things. Their lives are somewhat a struggle just on a day-to-day basis, and they feel, you know, whether it's true or not, they don't feel like they have a lot of rights or ability to control their situation. And so if you didn't know that, what do you think the mechanism is to educate these people?
I get the newspaper every day.
But I'm telling you, these people
I never knew
don't
about it.
necessarily.
I never knew about it. Send a flyer out, send something out to people. I mean, let the people know about it. I didn't know about it. 3 renters, I talked to everyone did not know about this. You know, the next issue, and I really think Trent, unfortunately, is putting himself in a bad position in a way too, is, and I'm going to back up one step. Jade had mentioned earlier about the child that died, unfortunately, during the Christmas time season. I don't know if you know the facts behind that. I don't know if you know the facts.
It was a conversion, am I right?
It was a conversion, correct. But I don't know if you know the facts behind the case, because I've heard all kinds of issues about that property. So again, I think you need to know the facts before we say stuff
It's
like
an
that.
electrical fire.
And that hasn't been proven. So I've heard different issues, and I don't want to get into that now. But again, I don't think we need to go out until, because of one case. The next thing, again, I'm going back to Trent. Let's say if he inspects that house that did burn down, unfortunately, the week prior, What kind of liability does the city have at that point? I think you ought to look at that. And as a council member, I'm not going to say yay to it when you've got some attorneys out there who would that would not like that. An inspector comes in a day, a week later, the property burns down, another child unfortunately dies. Who's going to be liable for that after the inspector gave it a clean bill of health? So I'm worried about that.
See, I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried about that at all, because I'd rather have our inspectors in there trying to make a difference, trying to improve the possibility that the electrical is okay, trying to improve the possibility that the mold is not there, trying to improve the possibility that they do have heat, they do have water, they don't have a hole in their ceiling, to potentially make a better life for those people that live there.
And
Anything
great with
can
that.
happen. So that's
you
hang on, no. So no. You asked the question.
No,
so
I
I'm just letting
agree.
you know.
Go ahead.
Bring that liability on, because at least we're going to be trying to make a difference, as opposed to saying people might die, but I don't want any liability, so we're just going to stay out of it. I'd rather act than react to terrible situations.
Well, again, I think short-term, long-term wise, I think this might, again, it might make a positive influence on the prices, but I think short-term, again, myself and other measures, he might be wanting to get out of the business. And what's that going to happen if he puts 100 properties on the market? It's going to lower the values. If he gets tired of it. People come to the community, they might want to buy here. Prices are higher. Rent prices are already high enough here in town, as you may know. They're going to go to other communities. I'm not talking about this too. Let me hit on one other thing, because I look at this for my kids. What happens in 10 years when mortgage companies say, you know what, I want to inspect your house. Okay, none of you guys rent. I guarantee you, most of you probably have mortgages. Okay, what happens when they come in? They see this housing code and they say, hey, we want to inspect our properties. We're going to pay the $25 so we can come in your house. Government can come in your house once a year and inspect your properties. Can you tell me that's not going to happen in 10, 20 years because
Do
we adopt
certain
policies
loans
like
not
this?
already come in and inspect? Does HUD or not HUD?
No.
Isn't there a mortgage
FHA,
type that does
don't they
already
have
come
to?
in?
No.
That's
No
a
mortgage type?
That's a
But I-
hypothetical for which you have no way of ever.
I never thought this would happen either.
Oh.
I mean, neither does the tenants.
Yeah, we've been
The
talking
tenants do
about
not
this
want.
for 20 years.
I mean, good tenants do not want government in their house. I'm just.
But we're not talking about good landlords and good tenants. We're talking
Correct.
about substandard housing that many of us have encountered, many people. The line of work that I am in, I deal with people who are exceptionally low income all the
I know you
time. And often are young, often women, often with children, and their knowledge base is exceptionally limited, and they are struggling on a day-to-day basis, and they take a lot on good faith of what they're told. They get into places that then are substandard. Their health is diminished by their living conditions. Their children's health is, whether it's asthma, whether it's the mold. They end up with a lot of health issues that really could all come back to their living environment. That
And then-
people don't always point that finger right back to that.
I don't think that's the only rental property in town.
No, but they've often spent every dime they have to get into that property on good faith that the landlord may have told them, well, we'll get that fixed, we'll take care of that, and then it never happens, and they don't know what their recourse is to get it taken care of.
Again, I don't think it's the only rental place in town. So that's my problem too. If it's that bad, they can move and find better landlords. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I did want to just bring up one thing about, we're not making this decision based on one fire that we don't have the facts on. I mean, the reporter right there can probably tell you how many fires he's written stories about in just the last 3 months. I wish Kim Forbes was here. And most of those were electrical issues. Not all of them were rental related. This is something we've been talking about for years and years and years, and it is community, it's citizen driven as well. Let's remember the Housing Commission is made up of Hutchinson residents, and they're pushing this forward as well.
I want to shift gears just a minute and ask Jana to come up. And something that caught my attention in the packet that we got this week was the meeting that you all had with the Landlords Association. And I was particularly pleased to see in there the recommendation of including an incentive program. Because, you know, we've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of good units in this community, and I've heard from a lot of people on this. And we talked about outreach and overreach and so on, but I think there's a component here, Jana, that I'd like to ask you to explain how that process is going to work in a little more detail, and how we can do a good job of communicating that to those units that have 5 or less deficiencies, so they can take advantage of this program. So can you spend a little bit of time on that?
Sure, and I didn't really stress the
No,
fact
you
that
didn't.
we went and talked to these, to that group. When we went to speak to the group, at first they were very hesitant. Of course, nobody wants new regulation. You know, it's a little scary. It's actually not new regulation, which we pointed out, but I think the people who are part of this group, by and large, don't have units that are the ones that we're trying to address. So they had questions, and by the end of the meeting, while I would say they maybe weren't overjoyed with the program, they understood the need for it, and they were supportive. One thing that they asked for, and Lawrence does do this, was an incentive. The way that we propose it would be if we went into a unit and let's say there were 5 deficiencies, maybe a couple of smoke alarms that didn't have a battery in them, or it's just an example, 5 deficiencies or fewer, that unit could be placed on a 6-year inspection cycle, which means that we wouldn't come back in there to re-inspect it for 6 years. The unit would still need to be registered and pay the $25 fee. We're trying to make this program as simple as possible. What we've heard and what we've seen with other programs is the more complicated you make it, the less likely it is to be successful. So we didn't want to mess with, okay, well, you don't have to pay. So the way that we are proposing it is that unit would be on a 6-year cycle. So we're fully anticipating that a lot of these units, and probably from many of the people who've spoken here today, will have units that are placed on 6-year cycles, that they get inspected once every 6 years, and that should be, that should work fine. I did want to also comment that we talked to the folks in the city of Lenexa, and they only do the outside right now of their buildings, but I think it was Lenexa. No, it was Lawrence. Lawrence does both. When Lawrence first started doing these inspections, and they just started last July, they their first couple of months they had very high fail rates in the 70-80%. But by the time the program had been in place for 6 months, the fail rates dropped down to 50%. And so I think we might see the same kind of thing, that people initially won't understand the program. We're going to try to do a lot of education, but that as people get used to what the requirements are, that we'll see a lot of these units will be passing, and probably passing quite favorably, so that they would be on 6-year cycles. So that's I kind of more than answered your question.
Good,
I
thank
think.
you.
But
Yeah.
So Janet, I don't know if you've gone to this level of detail. Do you see that as something, if they have 5 or less on discrepancies, would that be something that the landlord has to initiate to receive that incentive, or would it just be an automatic when the city comes back, says, yeah, less than
Yeah.
5, you're on a 6-year cycle?
We would automatically do that, and I don't think I answered your question. We already have a list from the appraiser of rental properties. They're able to run that for us. And so we will be notifying landlords if this passes, probably beginning in July, and every couple of months, we're telling them about the program, offering education sessions so that they will understand what we're looking for, and talking about the incentives. And, it would be great if we started and most of the units were passing. That'd be wonderful. But we just don't know. And I think, there are units out there that aren't, I know there's units out there that aren't safe.
Sure.
That shouldn't be rented. And we really don't have a mechanism other than this, for addressing that. And that's what the Housing Commission, that was their comments. The 2009 Housing Needs Assessment called for, one of the strategies was to adopt a rental inspection program. So way back then, in 2009, and I didn't look at the 2001, they may have called for that too, but I know in 2009, that was one of the items that the consultant recommended in order to address, to continuing decline in housing that we've been seeing in our community.
And I think we have a habit, and it's not just this city, a lot of cities, of commissioning these very expensive studies to try to figure out a way out of a mess. And then we get results back and recommendations that are not easy to swallow, so we just ignore them. I mean, already we're 6 years into past that recommendation. You know, I understand we have to chip away at some of these things, but.
Another thing I wanted to point out is that the city of Topeka is looking at a rental inspection program. They've been asking us for copies of the stuff that we have. I know Wichita has looked at it, it hasn't passed there, but I think that we're gonna see more communities doing this as the quality of housing stock throughout Kansas continues, well, I shouldn't say continues to decline, but if it does continue to decline, we're gonna see more communities doing this.
Thank you. Thanks, John, for kind of re-highlighting that. Do you have any other issues, concerns? Anyone else? Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to address council on this issue? Seeing none?
No,
Oh,
here's
sorry,
one.
go ahead.
Good morning. My
Morning.
name is Shane Iwashige. I live in Partridge, Kansas. I act as a purchasing and resident agent for investors investing in residential rentals in the city of Hutchinson primarily, and in surrounding communities. We are trying to be pretty deliberate, or very deliberate, about building a brand, providing exceptionally clean and well-maintained low-end to mid-range housing. So I'm not worried about our units passing inspection. I do have some concerns about some of the other impact that this legislation will have on the city, sort of along the lines that Mr. Harris brought up. Most of our houses are in average neighborhoods. Like I said, we try to build our brand around low to mid-range housing, not a lot in the high end, and I don't have any vision for working in the very low end. But I recently came across a property that I think is indicative of what I'm afraid is going to happen on a much larger scale. If this is enacted, it's a property that's on the open market, burned out a number of years ago, and somebody has come in and completely renovated everything. It has new electrical, new plumbing, new heat and air, new roof, new siding, new windows. Everything inside is brand new. The foundation is not in great shape. On the east and west walls, the foundation bows out somewhat. And I noticed as I read through the IPMC that the code leaves quite a bit of room for inspector interpretation, which I think is a good thing, but I am worried about, depending who that inspector is and how they interpret it. I noticed especially foundations, partly because I was thinking about this property for an investor, and partly because I spent 10 years replacing foundations, building new basements under existing houses. The foundation is not in great shape, but it is not a safety issue. The house, if the foundation is required to be replaced, which I think, according to a letter of the law interpretation of the code, it would need to be repaired or replaced, then all of a sudden, the value of the property that I think it would make a great rental property as is. You could buy it, put somebody in there and make good money off of it for a while, but I haven't bought it for an investor because I am worried about the long-term deterioration of the property. I think that property is going to be an unsaleable property to an investor because of the requirements, and so it's probably going to take about a $15,000 to $20,000 hit in price, and it's going to sell to a homeowner who has a great property to live in, but it doesn't address some of those foundation issues, and they aren't subject to inspections. I see a lot of that happening across the city in lower end housing, where an investor is going to make the determination that the property is not worth putting money into. They will either sell it outright, put it on the market, sell it at auction, or sell it on a land contract, and all of a sudden we're back to owner-occupied properties that aren't subject to the inspection. No investor in their right mind is going to go into a property knowing that they're going to have to spend X amount of dollars to bring it up to a standard in some of these neighborhoods that the appreciation is negligible at best. You know, we go into our properties and spend quite a bit of money after we buy them for investors to upgrade them. Our low end of rent is probably in the $5.25 range, and we know that we are not serving a large sector of the tenant population that can't afford that $5.25 because of the standard that we have set for ourselves. That's kind of, you know, where most of our prices end up at. What I am worried about is that this is a good attempt at addressing a very real problem, but will not actually gain us much ground, because I think a lot of those properties are going to, one way or another, be abandoned or go back to owner-occupied properties, and we still have the same problem we have now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone else in the audience that would like to address council? I think we've heard from almost everyone in the audience. Seeing none, does the council have any further questions, comments, or would we like to make a motion?
Well, I can't believe there's nothing we haven't said so far.
Either.
Been a lively discussion. I appreciate everybody's comments. However, I am going to recommend, make a motion that we approve the rental registration inspection program ordinance as presented by staff today.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Bush,
Yes.
Soldner,
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho,
Yes.
Dave Line,
Yes.
Prowett.
Yes.
We only have one more
We
item.
only have one item.
Yeah. It's gonna be quick.
So is this one.
No,
All right.
no, this one was not quick.
Well, I know that.
Next item, please.
Item 8A,
Hang in there,
update
Bob.
on 601 North Monroe.
Trent, we're gonna have to ask you to,
Yeah.
This
for
should,
Bob's sake.
I think this will be quick. Tony
I'm ready to make a motion.
is here. Okay. Tony, 601 North Monroe. Just over 60 days ago, we gave him an extension to do some repair work to the house that we had on our demolition list. He has made good progress on the house. As I reported last time, the foundation was all repaired. He has done extensive roof repair, window repair, some painting, some siding. He still has some more work to do. And I am requesting that we give him a 60-day extension to continue his progress.
In fact, I drove by the house just this week and noticed that you had made substantial progress on that. So I am going to move to approve a 60-day extension to complete the rehabilitation of the structure at 601 North Monroe.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Thank you for your investment.
I was just going to
Yes.
say, Tony, thank you for sticking with this and
Yeah.
that property. You've been a real trooper, and good luck.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this is attesting to that we've said, city staff really is willing to work with people and to try to make this right. And we have also, I know a couple of the gentlemen have left that had concerns about change in staff possibly. And we've addressed that a little bit of having rules fit in a manner that it's not so subjective that you have to worry about who's in that position. Tony, would you like to address council?
10 seconds. You know, when I took this on, I said, I'm scared to death.
Come up
of
to
this.
the podium,
Fred is
Tony.
just gonna beat me up.
You need to
But
speak
I
it.
have found
Come
out
to the
in last-
podium so that, you
The
know, we're
world
on,
will
we're on
hear.
TV.
Okay.
Yeah.
Start over.
60 days ago, I was just scared to death Trent was gonna just beat me up. But over 60 days, I've learned, you know, just call Trent. Yeah, sure, we can work something out. So, it's been a positive experience with me so far with the city.
Good.
Well, thank
And
you.
60 days ago, I just, why did I do this?
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad it's all kind of, you know, gotten your home to a direction you want it to be.
So, okay. There again, this was a rental property when it's done. I'm not sure which way I'm gonna go with it. Get rid of it or,
Well, just call Trent.
Well, you're meeting codes now, so
Well,
You're good to
not
go.
quite. We're struggling to get there.
we may be using your likeness and a quote on our pamphlets going out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any further comment? Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Bush,
Yes.
Soldner,
Yes.
Pyros de Carvalho,
Yes.
Dave Light.
Yes.
Prowett.
Yes. Next item, please.
Item.
I'd like to add something real quick if I could, Madam Mayor. We were going to add a quick item to your agenda, the emergency shelter grant that actually is due to the state April 20th, and we don't meet again until the 21st. And essentially, all we're doing is asking the mayor to be authorized to sign the emergency shelter grant that we'll submit by April 20th. Jan, if you stand up, if there's any questions about that. This is a grant that we've received for years, New Beginnings and
The
sexual
Sexual
assault.
Assault, Domestic Violence Center.
Did the deadline just kind of sneak up on us this time, or did they
Yes.
change
Yeah,
it?
it,
Oh,
it,
okay.
it sneaked up on us, and we didn't realize we had to have your authorization to sign the grant.
This is just to submit the grant. And
Gotcha.
So,
I'd make a motion to allow
Jana,
the
would
mayor
you
to sign.
state something that we?
Just real quick point of order. Paul, do we need to make a motion to add it to the agenda since it wasn't published in accordance with the rules for decision-making by a public body?
You can.
Is that a yes or a no?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
I'd like to make a motion that we add the item as presented by staff to the agenda for council action today.
I'll second.
Thank you. And do we need to call roll then on it? Would you please call
Yes.
roll?
Bush,
Yes.
Soldner.
Yes.
Pyros de Carvalho,
Yes.
Dave Light.
Yes.
Prowett.
Yes.
Thank you.
And then Jana, would you mind making a statement as to the approval of, for grant submission?
Yeah, I can just
So you
quickly tell you what the
received
grant is
Okay.
for. It's the Emergency Solutions Grant. We are not the grantee, we're the administrator of the grant. The sub-grantees we've had in the past have been New Beginnings and Sexual Assault Domestic Violence Center. We may see Interfaith Housing apply this year as well. And there's several categories that the state funds, but the majority of the funds have been for emergency shelter and rapid rehousing. And this past year, the city was a pass-through for $110,000 in grant funding. There's a 50% match requirement. We don't even have the applications in hand from our sub-grantees, or I would be bringing you that information, but they haven't provided that to us yet. They'll probably apply for around $200,000. That's what they applied for last year, and the state grant gave them the $110,000. The city does get a small administrative percentage, like 2.5%, for being the pass-through for the grant.
And you are asking the council to?
I'm asking the council to authorize us to go ahead and submit the application to the state and authorizing the mayor to sign the application to apply for the grant funding. We would still bring it back here if we receive the grant to authorize the acceptance.
And do we have a motion?
I would so move.
Second?
Thank you. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Bush,
Yes.
Soldner,
Yes.
Pyros de Carvalho,
Yes.
Dave Light.
Yes.
Prowett.
Yes.
Now, item 9, report of city officials.
Thank you. John, do you have anything this morning?
Well, I would defer my comments to the mayor and Bob Bush as well for, I've enjoyed personally as well as your expertise as longtime serving members of the city council. We appreciate your fine service and your great leadership. So appreciate that very much.
Thank you, John.
And I would just add that we also appreciate all the patience you've had in trying to train us up to learn, especially about the budget. It's overwhelming the first year on city council, and you've been a very steady guiding hand and great people to have in place to teach us the ropes. So thank you.
Well, we are going to come next time.
I was going to say, they aren't
So you're
shoveled out
saying
the
you
door
don't
yet.
have your speech prepared, so you're going to wait until the 20th.
We're going to
Yeah.
save people from speeches.
But thank you very much for your
Yeah,
comments.
thank you.
Thank you.
Nan, or Bob, do you have anything?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Well, what can I say after such allocates as John and Jade have given? I don't know what the news is going to do, Bob, without you to quote. So, we appreciate your service, and we are looking forward to celebrating with you next meeting.
I'm sure you'll fill my shoes just fine.
I doubt it.
Thank you.
We'll have to get spicier.
You will have to get a little bit more excitable. Okay?
Thank you.
We'll
And I
work
do
on
want
that.
to
We'll
remind
work on
everyone that Bob, for 8 years, has looked forward to an apple fritter on the last day.
I have.
Just,
So we all go to, okay.
yeah, you might end up with boatloads of apple fritters, but
Sweet.
FYI.
Let's go.
And I would just like to remind everyone that today is an election day, and do your civil duty and go out and vote. We've got a couple of important items on that ballot. And that is all I have. John?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on your issue
Other
of the arena. Of course, we're voting on that today, and should that pass, very quickly, in fact, at our April 21st meeting, we plan to bring back to the council a contract for architectural services. And again, we're going to be proposing that we continue our arrangement with Schaefer Johnson, Cox Fry, and St. Combs. We're also going to bring a resolution that amends our construction bidding process that we have in the city that would add construction management at risk as an option. Right now, we've got the traditional bidding, design, bid, build. We've got the design build as an option, and we want to add construction management at risk as an opportunity for us to consider. And then we'll also, at that meeting, talk about that process and be looking for the council to give us authority to proceed with the request for qualifications for their services if we choose to go that route. We've been doing a lot of investigation on that. We've got 2 large projects recently in Hutchinson that have used that, and the county with the jail, the school with 308 with the school project had some good success with that, and we think it's a large enough project. Some complexity will be involved in it as well. And we'll talk more about that at the meeting on the 21st as to our recommendations on that. So we've got a lot of things coming, but I know there'll be people, depending upon how things go today, want to know when are we going to start. And so we don't want to waste too much time. And it'll take us some time just to get through that process. So, and is there any questions on that?
I would just make the comment that when we built our warehouse, we did an at-risk program.
Yeah.
And the beauty of it is that you save money in areas you don't expect. That way you can spend money in areas that you don't expect, instead of being stuck to a budget where the contractor just charges you X amount and that's it, and you pay that amount whether it's high or low.
Yeah.
So that's something I would
That's a
strongly
good
encourage.
point.
I would strongly encourage council to look at, because we had great success with our warehouse and that type of program.
Thank you. That's one of the benefits that we highlight about that process, among some other things. So, and I think the important thing is we get the construction manager, if we go that route, on board at the very beginning of design. And so they're working with the architect. When the traditional process, sometimes the architect designs something and we put it out to bid, and contractors look at it and say, what's this? They bid on it anyway. And then you get in the field and figure out, well, this isn't going to work. So I think it might work for us. So we'll talk more about that, though, on the 21st. So.
John, I don't want to get ahead of you, but I know we've talked about the ultimate appointment of a citizen advisory building committee, and I know you've got that on your mind.
Yep. Yes, sir. We do.
Assuming that if it is passed today, that will then be coming to us soon.
That'll be on that, probably on that 21st as well.
On the 21st.
Yeah, so we can get that group involved. And the mayor and I have been talking about that, some different names, and want to visit with the vice mayor, should she be elected mayor. The jury's
I don't
still
know
out.
after today's meeting.
Yeah. And we'll be bringing back that recommendation to this group on the April 21st.
So we've got a
21st.
prospective slate and
Oh, good.
and want a little approval from people who will still be here.
Yeah.
Right.
The new council.
The new council too, so, yeah.
Yeah, very good.
And that is all I had, Mayor and Council, but I would ask for a motion to recess into executive session for the purpose of discussing confidential data related to financial affairs or trade secrets of second parties.
So moved until 1 o'clock.
Oh, my goodness. Somewhere at 12:30.
Well, we don't have to do another
12.
motion
We'll
if it goes on forever.
That's true.
I'm just saving us time.
With a 5-minute break.
Yeah, do you need a break?
Okay.
I'm taking a break.
Okay.
Second.
Wow, exert
Nobody
your
wanted to
power.
second it, but I
That's
guess
right.
I will.
Call roll.
Roll.
Call roll.
Thank you for
Linda?
your kind words.
Call roll.